Hi, I'm Pamela Davis, and I'm the host of my YouTube channel, Reincarnation Chronicle, also an investigative transformationalist exploring life's great questions. And one of the great questions I've chosen to devote a lot of time and energy to is the question of reincarnation. Maybe you're wondering why I would do that. Why would I invest a lot of time and energy into something that most people in the West still aren't ready to accept as even a real possibility in life? Well, it starts out on a very personal level because as a child, one of my first memories, and I don't remember quite how old I was, but probably somewhere between 3 and 5, was of being burned at the stake as a witch. Now, I don't think that this is a very common fantasy for children that age. And I was not in the habit of watching television, certainly not frightening television. I wouldn't have been allowed to do that. My family wasn't reading to me terrible fairy stories or awful folk stories of witches being burned at the stake. So I had no context for this kind of memory, which was terrifyingly real to me. And the images of it stayed with me for many years. And I knew that it wasn't, I knew even at that age that it was mine, that it was a memory. This wasn't a fantasy. But I couldn't figure it out because I had no information that could explain this to myself. So I pondered a lot of things as a child and had a rather unusual childhood. I was sick a lot, home a lot, doing a lot of reading and inner dialogue, I guess you might say. A lot of deep thinking because I was alone and ill a lot of the time. But by the time I was educated in Episcopal church schools, where I went to chapel every morning and heard Bible stories, which I thought were wonderful. I really enjoyed that. But by the time I was 13, I was having real problems with a lot of what I was being told. I took confirmation classes so that I could officially receive communion and all of that. In the catechism and in all the religious training I had, there were major questions that were never answered. One of the things that we are taught in Judeo-Christian traditions is that with every baby that's born, God creates a new soul. This is a new soul that has no pre-existence and presumably will have a future one. But in no way, it doesn't have any previous existence. And yet somehow we're supposed to be okay with the fact that one baby can be born into luxurious, privileged circumstances, as I was actually. I grew up in West LA, and I knew people with means and every opportunity, so that children born to people that I knew had every access to education, opportunity, comforts, and basically good treatment and every chance to arrive at a ripe old age having lived a successful and happy life with family and all of that. With a life expectancy in the 70s, 80s, even 90 years old. And yet at the same time I thought, but wait a minute, that same baby that was born in Beverly Hills at that hour, at the same hour perhaps, there was a child born in a country like India or maybe in China into terrible, frightening circumstances, into poverty and fearful situations where perhaps they were abused, intentionally maimed or blinded to make them more convincing and successful beggars. Maybe they were born with, not only there, but any baby can be born with a terrible malady, birth defects, all kinds of dreadful things. And yet, and that baby might die, before the age of 3, 5, 10. Anyway, a child that's going to have no chance and definitely no long life. Virtually no happiness, nothing but misery. And yet, it's that one chance, that one shot that baby had one shot, and the baby in Beverly Hills had one shot. And yet they were both created by God, who we presume is just and fair. Well, this made no sense to me. Fairness and justice have to be attributes of God, right? Or there is no God. If God is not just and fair, then he's not God. There is no God. Now, I have a son who teaches a rather esoteric form of Buddhism, who tells me that yes, but it's really not up to us to judge what might be fair or just in the mind of God. Well, this is very hard for me to buy into, because I think that we're all endowed with inalienable concepts of justice, which admittedly have evolved over the centuries. You know, we're not, too many of us, really cool with the idea of owning slaves and you know, barbaric invasions and so forth, although, you know, I think we're doing our fair share of some of that. And there are slaves all over the planet now, even more numerically than there were in ancient times. But then our population of the world is so much greater than it was then that it works out about the same. But nevertheless, people are still of a mind that this is no longer okay. And we have, I think we have come to this because of our focus on ethics studies, morality, and an emphasis on the religious doctrines that we've been taught. And certainly justice and a just God are an integral part of that. So I could not reconcile in my own mind these tremendous inequities. They made no sense to me. And my own personal experience from my heart told me that there was really a different reality. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of pondering, and yet I thought, well, where does it all come from and what does it all mean? When I graduated from university, my first job sent me to New York to be trained for the work I was to do by the corporation that hired me. And I was lodged at the very beautiful St. Regis Hotel for a number of weeks in the winter. And while I was in New York, one afternoon I decided that I had to see St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is really a very beautiful cathedral. I would encourage anybody who goes to New York to be sure and see it. And as I sat there one dreary, cold, miserable afternoon, just for some quiet time and to kind of absorb the wonderful environment inside the cathedral, it occurred to me that everything that I was and everything that I ever had been was carried somewhere within my being, between my ears, in my heart, somewhere in my being. It was all there. It had been stored somehow. And why wasn't it accessible? Well, it should have been accessible, I told myself, and why wasn't it? And so I determined that I was going to see what I might be able to do about that. Well, the following weekend, which came along pretty quickly, was miserable. The weather was just horrible. It was like 38 degrees and sleet and rain and snow falling in New York, and it was just not tempting at all to go outside, and I wasn't feeling that well anyway. So I thought, oh, I'm going to stay in my nice, cozy, comfortable room here at the St. Regis and see what I can find out about me. So I ordered up room service, got myself cozy in bed with a pad and pencil. I had been reading, James Hilton, I think, Hilton's Lost Horizons, which is a beautiful little book, and not a heavyweight intellectual or spiritual exercise, but I think it was just enough to kind of open a portal to abilities that I didn't know I had, but I found out that weekend that I had them. And sitting there going into a meditative state, I told myself, all right, remember. Your assignment, I said to myself, is to remember. And from some deep well of ancient memory, gradually pictures began to emerge. And they were not whole lifetimes. Some people, especially children, can access very detailed memories. Most people who do have these memories are, the memories are partial, as were mine, but they were enough to let me see what part of a larger story they belonged in. And they were very clear. They were like bringing up pictures on your television set or even watching a movie. And I was able to study them in detail. They were not fleeting. They could be held in place for me to actually open my eyes, take notes, and then I closed my eyes again, and the picture was still there, and I was able to continue to see it and to make notes about what I was seeing until I couldn't figure out any more about it. And then I would ask for the next one to come up. And this lasted for hours over the better part of that Saturday and Sunday on that rainy, miserable afternoon in the St. Regis Hotel in New York. But it changed my life forever, because it's one thing to have studied a religion, and especially Christianity, where you're taught to believe in a life after death and believe in the existence of the soul. But it's quite a different matter when you experience it. You can believe that we exist after death, but when you experience yourself as having lived prior to this life, and to experience your death and to know that you've survived and that here you are in this life, and that therefore death holds no terrors, it's a very different story. So that's what we're going to stay with today, and I would encourage all of you to believe in your own ability to access the greater realities and the past of who you are. Remember, it's all yours, and it's yours for the seeking, and it is there. It may take time, it may take effort and discipline, but it's yours. So thank you very much, and I'll look forward. Be sure to stay with me on my YouTube Reincarnation, the Reincarnation Chronicle, and I'll be posting new videos regularly, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon.